Well, I think that the question that we'll be looking at today, and it's really it's an extremely important question because of what is going on in the news, which is, bizarre. And the question is, who should we listen to? Who should you listen to? And, there are many people in the world today who take Bible scriptures literally. And for years and years, for all time, I guess, we have been listening to them, mainly. And one of the, main points of the concern that I have is the fact that if you look at the Bible literally, it seems to justify killing and bombing people. Well, not bombing people, because they didn't have bombs in the days of the Bible, but it seems to justify killing people. So, if the Bible says you can kill people, well then, when people who claim to follow the Bible do that, well, then how can you fault them, son? Incidentally, let me tell you, we're getting a really good response on the website. Our website, if you are into that stuff, is hiddenmeanings.com. And right now, as of this morning, we have 287,000, I think 82, 287,000, about 287,100 people have visited it. So that's significant. If you look at it, it's only leaving us about 13,000 more, and we'll have 300,000 that have visited that website. That's getting to the point where it's pretty significant, and especially originating out of a small community such as this one, Forked River. That's significant. And so if you if you take a look at the website and you like what you see, you can come down and visit. And we start every Sunday around 11:15, Sunday morning, 11 o'clock. And, come on down. We're at the Village Green Shopping Center, Route 9, Forked River. And, if you like what you see, and we could probably fit you in. So come down. But let's get back to the point of the problem of people who interpret religion in such a way that they hear voices and they, they channel words and they get words of knowledge. In Christianity, they get words of knowledge. In New Age, they call it channeling. Whatever it is, you have to take somebody's word for the fact that they heard from some higher being. And that can get a little bit scary because you can't get into everybody's head. You're not quite sure where they're coming from. Oh, I heard God told me this. I remember a guy we used to know who was in the record business, in the Christian music record business. And people used to come up to him and say, God told me that, I should record for your record label. And he would say, well, that's funny, he never mentioned it to me. And that's a really good point. The point is, what do we do when people say, well, God told me to do this, God told me to do that? Religion is filled, not only religion, but New Age and all these types of things, they're filled with people claiming that God told them something. God told me this. But here's the point, God does not speak English. And see, the only way that one can open a channel for God to make changes really is meditation, where there is no language. There is no language in meditation. It's all done via light, via electrical impulses, if you would. So what we have to try to do is close down our connection to people who hear voices instructing them to do things, and open lines of communication to that Holy One where you don't really hear anything, but a change happens. See, I mean, it's not a question of, oh, I think I heard God telling me I should go here. Now, that's your mind telling you. That's, you know, your own emotions telling you. See? So who should we listen to? We have people in governments, in this government and in other governments, that, you know, get down, or they either pray or ask Jesus or get to Allah, and when they get up, they feel that they should either attack somebody else, or they attack another country, or they plow into the World Trade Center because God said so. So regardless of whether these people are Muslims or Christians or Jewish, it's evil. It's insane. And it's a total disregard for life, for nature, and for reason. Last week I showed a couple of things that I thought were somewhat disturbing. And they involve us all. And the disturbing thing to me is being governed by people who are making regulations or doing things that involve me and you that they said they're doing because it's God's will or God told them to do that. Let me show you this first one in Overhead 662. And this was about here, Alabama Governor Bob Riley, and who said his religious views influenced him to give the state of Alabama a tax increase. God spoke to him, you know. It says down here, what does the Bible have to do with tax policy for Alabama Governor Bob Riley? A lot. Now, if God told him that he should, you know, pay taxes, raise taxes to pay for the poor, maybe God's telling him he's not paying his fair. Maybe this guy's cheating on his income taxes. But that's fine. You know, God told me I should pay more taxes. Go ahead. Help yourself. But that's not the point here. He's saying that Jesus would want this and God would want this, so he's raising everybody else's taxes. I don't think so. You know? God, I mean, I'm sure if you walk to the other people in Alabama, knock on their door and say, did God tell you to pay more taxes? He said, no, yeah, I didn't hear nothing. He told this guy. That's scary. You know, you don't need that. And so you see then what's on the loose today. People operating on the basis of their religious principles, which is perfectly fine, except when it affects me or affects you. And it's not. But and then we showed something that was a little more disturbing. If we look at Overhead 663, and the title of this comes from a Jewish newspaper called Haaretz, H-A-A-R-E-T-Z. And they took minutes of a meeting between Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas and Ariel Sharon. And here's the relevant paragraph. It admittedly second-handed, but no less, let's listen. Abbas, who's the Prime Minister of Palestine, said that President Bush promised to speak with Ariel Sharon about getting rid of Arafat. And then, according to Abbas, immediately thereafter, President Bush said, God told me to strike al-Qaeda, and I struck them. And then he instructed me to strike at Saddam, which I did, and now I am determined to solve the problem in the Middle East. If you help me, I will act. If not, the elections will come and I'll have to focus on them. So here is somebody saying that the President Bush, said in this meeting, God told me to strike out at these people. Okay, and that's fine. And if he went over there and punched Saddam in the nose, fine. But what happened wasn't that. You know, God told me to strike at Saddam, so I'm sending your kids. That's the problem. Now, if you look here, this is from the Moscow Times. This is paper in Russia. And they say So now we know, after all the mountains of commentary and speculation, all the earnest debates over motives and goals, all the detailed analysis of global strategy, it all comes down to this. George Bush waged war on Iraq because, in his own words, God instructed me to strike at Saddam. It says this gospel was revealed in the Holy Land this week through a partnership between Israel and the newspaper Haaretz. So, you know. Now that of course, leaves everything to be very scary, because now, I mean, it's one thing. God told me that we should be paying more taxes because, we have to take care of the poor. So this guy gives you a tax increase because of what he heard God say. That's one thing. But then God told me that we should invade this country, and so I'm going to send your kids over there to do that. That's another thing. And of course, a lot of people got killed. And the only point we're raising, we're not talking about whether it was right, whether it was wrong, or anything like that. We're simply talking on this one fact. And I mean, George Bush isn't the only one. I mean, Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden, Ariel Sharon, all of these people are very religious people, and they follow their particular brand of religion, and it winds up, that you and I and our kids wind up are the ones that have to do the shooting and the killing. I mean, hundreds of American kids died in Iraq, and they still are every day. Thousands of Iraqi soldiers died. Thousands of people were killed in the World Trade Center. Thousands of people died in Afghanistan. They're still blowing each other up over there. I mean, all this stuff because these different leaders hear God telling them to do something. See? Well, if they all get together and get around and get a gun and go after in the woods and find each other and shoot each other, that's nobody's business. But it doesn't involve them. Nobody knows where Osama is. Nobody knows where Saddam is. President Bush is in the White House. Ariel Sharon's in his place. They're all happy. They're going on a vacation. They're playing golf or whatever it is. And everybody else getting killed. So here's the situation. If this is not something that was an off-the-cuff remark, but regardless of what it is, something else happened this week, which supports this. Now, this was a second-hand statement, so everybody said, well, we don't really know. I mean, whether somebody said that. All right, if this is an off-the-cuff remark, we'd need something to support that, something to substantiate that that's the way the president feels. Well, this week the president was in Uganda, Africa. And if we look at overhead 664, we will see from the Associated Press what he said over there. And the headline is, Bush, God has called us. God has called us. President Bush on Friday met Uganda victims of AIDS and so forth and so on. He pledged to Africans, you are not alone. America has decided to act. And then he said, I believe God has called us into action. So on the heels of what Haaretz in Israel said, he said about attacking Saddam because God told him, now we have this here that says, God has called us into action. Our country has a great responsibility. So on the basis of that, it would seem that he is really operating out of a problem or out of a position that says God talks to him. And that, whatever he thinks God tells him, is going to obviously affect us. And it does. So it reduces our government to the same level as the governments that we've been criticizing over there, who bow down and pray and get up and says, Allah wants us to do this, to kill the infidels. And so that we're all following people who are hearing voices telling them that God told them to do this. Okay. But what, you can take that down. And why I'm dwelling here is we're not criticizing it. We're raising a red flag here. There's something to be frightened about, not only from the president of this country, but from all of these world leaders who are hearing a voice tell them to do this. Of course, the world leaders over there, their God is telling them to attack us. The world leaders over here, Their God is telling them to attack them, and it's all the people who aren't listening to any gods who are the ones that have to do the attacking. And that's what's scary, okay? But what compounds this and makes it really scary is this, which happened this week. And we see an overhead 665 from CBS News. And it says from CBS News, Bush knew the Iraq info was false. When President Bush told the nation incorrectly that Iraq had tried to buy uranium from Africa, that was for the nuclear, he did so despite being warned by the CIA that it wasn't true. CBS News has learned exclusively. Now that's, you know, that's heavy duty. That's extremely serious stuff. And I mean, you know, people say, "Ah, well, you shouldn't be criticizing, you know, left wing or whatever." It's not a question of that. It's a question of the people of the world being subjected to the whims of some who feel that God is directing them. And even if it gets to the point where you know that what you're saying is not true, you're going to say it anyhow. Now, obviously, somebody in the government would have to fall for this. I mean, what I mean by that is, you know, the president or the vice president is not going to take responsibility. So somebody has to take the blame. Well, somebody did. And if we look at the overhead 666, here's the guy. This is the guy. This guy's name is George Tenet, and he's the director of the CIA. And he said, I did it. I didn't tell the president that the information wasn't true. Tenet takes responsibility. Now, the problem with this is, and this is a big problem, and that's why it's going to explode into something horrendous, is because Mr. Tenet had been trying for a year to convince the British that they shouldn't go with that information about Iraq and the uranium for nuclear bombs. So what he's saying is he told the British that they shouldn't use it, but he didn't tell the president that he shouldn't use it. And you'd have to say, do you believe that? Of course not. But I mean, somebody has to go down, you know, and of course, a lot of Democrats and Republicans are demanding that this guy get fired. But of course, the president, no, we're not, you know, we have confidence in him. But then I have to fire him, because if they fired him, then he'd get ticked off and tell the truth. And you know, the interesting part about this is this guy says now that the information that the president said he had in the State of the Union speech about Iraq doing this was the forged document. But nobody has ever said who forged it. In other words, somebody made it up, but nobody has said who did that. You know, so this is what, and yet, in the middle of all of this, thousands of Iraqi men, women, and children have been killed, destruction, American soldiers dead, and we have this. And it's not right, obviously. It's very, very wrong. And you know, if you take this, which said, no, it was my fault, I didn't tell the president, but CBS saying, hey, the CIA warned the president, you know, you got another Monica Lewinsky thing here. See, here's CBS saying the president knew it was false, and he had been warned by the CIA. Now the CIA saying, we didn't tell him. Or we told the English, but we didn't tell him. So that's, you know, it's like that old thing that says, this would be like President Clinton saying, well, it was all Monica Lewinsky's fault. I had nothing to do with it, you know. So in this particular case, the CIA becomes Monica Lewinsky. So here, Mr. Tenet of the CIA said, even though the British have said that for the last year the CIA has been after them to take the information out of their records because they didn't think it was true. So in other words, the CIA told the British, they didn't tell the president. Oh, it says, what a tangled web we weave when first we tried to deceive. Now, here's the problem with all of this. Here is the president saying, you know, he was told by God to do this, and the next thing we know, he's telling everybody in the State of the Union that Saddam Hussein is trying to get this nuclear material from Africa, and now we find out that that was not true. And here, everybody's passing the buck on who's to blame for this, and the English are involved in it, and Tony Blair and all these people, and it's all a mess, but everybody's in their graves who was killed over this mess. But you know, this isn't anything that's new either. I mean, this goes right back to the very Bible. In taking the Bible literally, you see the very same thing, you see. In other words, in the Bible, according for Israel to reach its goal, and in order for Israel to accomplish what God wanted it to do, it had to go around killing everybody. It had to invade other nations. It had to invade other cities. And it had to destroy them and loot them and kill the people. Not unlike what we did. I mean, if you look at this, and you look at what happened in Iraq, it's not unlike what's in the Bible that happened in those cities over there. Let me show you overhead B-140, which we've seen before, but this is God's instructions to Moses about what he should do with the people there that are the enemies, or perceived enemies. In other words, the Muslims, if you would, of the time. Kill every male among the little ones. That's the little boys. And that's good. They'd already killed the men. Kill every woman that has known a man by lying with him. That's a woman that's had relations. But all the women, children, all the little girls, the cuties, that have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. That's gross. That's the word of God, but that's gross. Say. But the problem is that in slaughtering all these people and doing this horrible thing, abusing these little kids, the justification was, well, it's God's word. God wanted us to do that. I have people telling me that to this day. I get email from people that say God takes vengeance on his enemies. What, by raping little girls and killing little boys? But you see, that kind of mentality is still ingrained in the minds of people today, political people today, on both sides of the ocean, not just here, all over the place. God told them to do this, whether they be in the church, in the temple, in the synagogue, wherever they are, God told them to do it. And so they say that go ahead and kill. Guy's flying a plane, plows into the World Trade Center, kills thousands of people, and leaves behind all this stuff about God told him to do it. And now, on top of like what we're talking about with the Iraq thing, Tom Keene, who's a very ethical person, a Republican guy who was formerly the governor of New Jersey, was appointed to investigate 9/11, but he's evidently going, too deep, and now he's complaining the government won't give him the information. That, he's having a hard time getting the information about what went on, which is also scary. Why would anybody not want, but they don't want you to know something happened there. That's crazy. These guys taking planes, and then you get the list of the people on the planes. There's no Arabs on them, on the list. Oh God! So it's crazy stuff, and it's scary. And unfortunately, as we're showing you, God is involved on all sides, and we're in the middle of it. So what you have then, I think that's the last one, Joe. You can turn it off. So what we have now is human beings doing things in God's name in order to satisfy voters. In other words, we're doing this And, you know, the religious right, the Christian right, you know, they'll vote for me because I said God, you know, I always say Jesus and all this stuff. And the same thing over there in these other places. It's all because of who the religious people are. But really, their motives are based on not what God wants anybody to do, but what they want to do. Blaming somebody else. So then the question comes down, who do you follow? I mean, regardless of whether you live here or you live over in Israel or you live in the Middle East or wherever you live, who the heck can you trust any of these people? Any of them, regardless of who they are. Can you trust them? I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. I didn't know that Iraq wasn't trying to get nuclear stuff. Same stuff. Okay? I mean, one guy gets impeached because he had sex. The other guy, well, you know, let's put it behind us. And thousands of people got killed. So you have to read in the Bible, basically, about, you know, what we're talking about. In the Scriptures, which are mythological Scriptures, they speak in some detail about what are called fallen angels. Fallen angels. And of course, you'll go into churches and they'll give, you know, big lectures about, you know, all the angels fell. Well, the guy that's giving you the lecture is a fallen angel himself. The fallen angels are us. We are the fallen angels. There ain't nobody else fallen. We're the fallen angels. And that's exactly what you're reading about. When you read about all these people justifying killing and blowing things up and all of this stuff and saying God told them to do it, you're reading of fallen angels, people who absolutely use God, use the Bible to carry out their own mischief. Fallen angels who are making the earth a violent mess. So your decision will have to be, who do I follow? Am I going to follow a fallen angel or am I going to follow a higher angel? Am I going to follow the fallen light beings, of which I am one and you are one, or am I going to follow the higher light beings, which are the invisible source? Now, in order to understand that, we spoke about it, you arrived on this planet as a light being, a consciousness, an intelligence, and you were looking for a body that you might experience life, that's all, that you might sense, that you might totally live in this realm of consciousness. You see, the situation is that there is nothing in the entire existence in the universe that is the invisible staying invisible, because all invisible life, which is light beings, look for a body so they can experience. It doesn't make any difference whether it's a different kind of body than we have, but it's a body because it's necessary to fulfill itself. It experiences, okay? I mean, if you take a light bulb, you have the filament and you have, you know, the glass or whatever it is, the bulb and the little metal that screws into the socket. Well, you got to have that in order for the light to go in there, don't you? I mean, you've got to have a body, you've got to have a bulb, or you can't have the light. I mean, if you take the bulb out of your lamp and turn the lamp on, there ain't going to be any light in there. How come? Well, because there's no body in it. You need to have a body so the light can go in it. It's the same thing. You're a bulb. You need light in order to go into the bulb in order so you have a body. Same way that a light fixture needs a bulb in order that the light can go in it. And that is exactly what we're talking about. The problem is each of us as light beings came into bodies, and what happened then was we were raised and trained, went to school, went to churches, had governments that were operated by other light beings who had fallen so deep into obsession with the lower that they were totally out of contact with the higher, And they are what the Bible calls fallen angels. See, and for those on television, an angel is an angle of light, which is a photon, which is a messenger particle. When that angle of light comes to Earth, okay, it will seek a body. And that's what they do. Not always successful, but they can dissipate and go on, bounce back up, come down again, just like rain does, and seek another body. But an angle of light is a messenger particle, and that's what the Bible calls an angel. But when the angel comes into a body, it can get so wrapped up and enamored and involved in that which is the physical side, because of all its, that it becomes a fallen angel. In other words, it is totally cut off from that which is the higher. Remember what we did last week? Here's God, and God's transmitter is sending out beacons for us to instruct. And here we are, but we keep getting further and further away. It's just like in your car, remember we said? You get in your car, you got your station on, music is great, you like that song, but you're going so far away that suddenly it starts to break up, and then before you know it, you can't hear it anymore. Well, that's what's happened here. That's what a fallen angel is. A fallen angel is an angle of light who became a human being by entering a body. That's fine. So far, so good. Now, as an infant, it's listening totally here, like an animal does, instinct. But then, as it continues to get schooling from people who have already fallen, it gets parenting from people who have already fallen. It gets religion from people who have... These people have been cut off for years because they've gone so far. And so all of these people become the ones that train us, and so then we wind up being fallen angels. And then as fallen angels, we can bow down to Allah and say, let's fly planes into the World Trade Center. We can go in with our Bible and say, Jesus is Lord, and let's go bomb the hell out of Iraq. I mean, you know, that's how this all works. See, an angel, an angle of light, comes into a body, becomes a child. It's raised by other angles of light who had come before that, and they had fallen and separated from God. And so then everybody becomes a fallen angel. Now, this little child who's a fallen angel has sexual intercourse and produces other ones and raises the kid as to be another fallen. And so you keep populating and populating with fallen angels. And the idea then is to get back here, to make a U-turn, come back up this highway, back towards the transmitter where God is, and raise yourself out of the mess. I mean, you've got enough that we've seen in this few minutes, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, about the lunacy that's going on from world leaders who are, you know, killing and blowing up and God knows what else because God spoke something to them. Okay. So the ancient directions, and that's what Bible, Quran, Suttas, Vitras, these are ancient directions written mythologically, written in symbolic form, so that as we evolve in intelligence and science, we can deal with life the way we're supposed to, say. But these things were twisted. And the figures that were provided to us in ancient myths to guide our life experiences were taken in literal terms, see? And so the Jesus light that's inside of you, that is crucified on the tree, the cross, which is your body, in Golgotha, which is your skull, this became a real man that God had to torture to death in order to forgive you. In other words, a blasphemy against God became a doctrine of the church. I mean, it's lunacy. Absolute lunacy. And yet, that becomes so sacred to us, we bow down and we in order for us to be saved, we say, believe this stuff, instead of understanding that that whole story is an adventure of life that occurs inside of every human being. So the world is plunged into the ravages of cancers, diseases of all horrible kinds, wars of all horrible kinds, greed, violence, destruction, and all that stuff, say. And then, as these fallen angels become more materialistic, reach this age of Aquarius, begin to become intelligent in the realms of the things of the earth, not only do they kill each other, but now they can kill each other with all of these sophisticated weapons. They've got all of these tremendous things that can blow up, you come into your mailbox and blow the house and all this kind of stuff. So you and me and everyone who has followed these people for years, you can't blame it. It's not Bush or Saddam, but this has been going on for years and years and years. We followed them into the darkness, and then it got so bad that even though you continue to go to church, and even though you continue to vote and you pay the taxes and all of these things, you get inside of yourself and you say inside of yourself that something's not right. You know, you feel it, you know it, you don't know what to do about it, you're not happy. What's the purpose in all of this? Why do people act the way they do? Why, do we kill people? I mean, God, you go back to Vietnam and they drop napalm and burning everybody. You say, why? So, and then you find a lot of times you're not able to say this to somebody else because then you get in a fight, you're not patriotic, you're not a good Christian, you're not a good Jew, so you have to keep your mouth shut. But inside of yourself, you know that this isn't the way things are supposed to be. But the answer to all of this is because these people who are doing this mischief are bringing their thoughts into powers on the basis of what comes to them not from the higher, but from the lower. And it really comes from people who many, many thousands of years ago knew better, but on the other hand were so enamored with the prestige, getting on television, look, I'm in charge, leading people, controlling people, and then money and oil and all of this stuff, and so the whole thing becomes a disaster. So then you have to sit and ask yourself, how long, and you can see the chaos we looked at a little while ago. This is going to blow to the, what's going to happen here, God only knows, but it's going to blow, all kinds of things are going to come as a result of this in England and here, and everybody lying and pointing fingers and, But for your personal well-being, the question would be, who am I? Who are they? Well, we're all light beings. We are all fallen light beings. See, that's what it means that everyone has fallen and come short of the glory of God. No, that means the point is, when we got into a body, we were trained by people who had already fallen, and and then each of us goes over like dominoes, and we fall simply because we reach a point where we've lost contact altogether with that which is the higher. We don't even know it has existed. See, we've lost total contact with it, and we are totally consumed. And who is our gods? We have these religious people. My God, you can't even get people. Forget about getting mad at the president because he does this and all this lying and all of it. You can't even get people to come against people who molest children in the church. Nobody says anything. Well, it's my religion. Oh, I can't. I mean, this is how bizarre it has gotten to the most gross thing. Leaderships in churches where little children are sexually abused on the holiness of the altar, and nobody says anything. Well, and they all meet again. Well, we have to change our rules. Have new rules. I mean, they should all be in jail. There's a guy, the bishop in Phoenix, who used to send all of these guys who abused the kids in church and send them to different places, not tell anybody. Obviously, he wasn't on it. This is the guy that went out, hit somebody with a car and then drove home. Killed the person with a car and drove home. Well, he finally had to retire. But what happened? What would happen to you and me? Right. So we get to this point then that we find that there's such a break in the connection between us and what God is, but it's totally irretrievable. You can't. The only way is you have to make a U-turn. You have to go back, and you have to find it inside of yourself. And that means, in order to find that which is the transmitter of God, you have to turn the transmitter. You have to turn the Bush, the Saddam, the Clinton, all of these you have to turn them all off, and you have to just listen here. And I say, well, I can't do that. I mean, I got to listen to the radio. I'm not talking about that. What I'm saying is you have to do what Jesus says. You have to enter into the meditative process. You have to separate from thought. When you separate from thought, you are now cutting off contact with this, and you are reestablishing contact with the higher. That's the only possible way. Otherwise, it's a no-show. And if you look at this stuff that we looked at this morning, you can see that the world, this country, the planet Earth, is on its way to the toilet because of its absolute blasphemy, if you would, of blaming all of this horror on God. See, these scriptures that we read were written many thousands of years ago by light beings who had not fallen. These were written by higher light beings. They had not fallen as we had. And what they said, they wrote in symbols. They didn't write in plain language. Why? Because these writings were set there so that after thousands of years of evolution, people who evolved to a point of understanding about atomic energy, about subatomic things, about electronics, about so forth and so on, about light and energy and so forth, would begin to understand what was being said, because the people back when these were written hadn't a clue. They hadn't evolved. It wasn't ready for them yet. Okay? I mean, they wouldn't know that taking a rib out of atom means taking an electron out of atom. They didn't know that then. They couldn't even conceive it because they didn't know what an atom was. But we do. See? And we know that, taking an electron out of an atom and putting it into another atom creates yin-yang, male and female, positive and negative, and that splitting the atom is basically the thought of Genesis. We know that. But thousands of years ago, they couldn't conceive of that. So it's written in that symbol, a symbol, so that we get to this point and we can understand it. And the mythologists took natural electromagnetic activity of the body and the earth and the cosmos and gave each names representing gods and demons and all of that stuff. But the lunacy that's going on here is that people took it literally. And so they can justify their killing in the same way that you see people justified the killing in the Bible, which is mythological, by saying God said it. Perfectly natural occurrences were described in adventure stories. But unfortunately, the world is still looking at the story and not at the meaning. Where did this all come from? Where did it all come from? It was impacted into Judaism in Christianity in 300 BC. See? When the Old Testament became a Greek document called the Septuagint. 300 BC, the Old Testament of the Bible became a Greek document called the Septuagint. Now, 300 BC is a long time ago, okay? But that's when the Old Testament, whatever was from the tribes of the Hebrew, became Greek. And it then began to be filled with those different parts of Greek mythology. See? So then you say to yourself, no, wait. Now, the New Testament was always Greek. That's written in Greek. Then you say to yourself, well, where then did this stuff about Jesus with a Greek name get involved in Palestine and Israel? I mean, why are these stories written about Israel and Palestine, yet Jesus with a Greek name? With Greeks, what's that? Why was that? There were Jews who came from Palestine, settled in Greece, and became extremely fluent in the ways of Greek literature and Greek art and Greek philosophy and Greek mythology, and these people were called Hellenists. 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 And the Hellenists then would look at the ancient myths that they had at that time and begin to write their own mythology, but they would write it connected back to their old homelands of the Jews, Israel. You see? Do you honestly believe that if a Jewish Jew wrote the New Testament, that Jesus would have a Greek name? Of course not. Jesus is a Greek name. It doesn't connect to Jehovah. It doesn't connect to Joshua. It is purely a Greek name. Now, it was written, as I said, by Greek Hellenists who were people who had come into the Greek culture from Israel. And that's totally the explanation for it. Those who were Greek with a Jewish ancestry wrote the stories, and so they wrote of Israel in their myth, and their hero was the sun god, the light of the world, Jesus. The Son of God is the S-U-N of God, Jesus. They were fluent in Greek literature, religion, and that's why Jesus is a Greek name which has a mythical value of 888, which is the mythical sun, S-U-N. All Greek mythology written by Hellenists. So entry into the earliest Christian communities involved giving up one's wealth to the common society of Christians and living communally and equally with others. And these small societies were at first composed entirely of Jews, so the bulk of the laws and practices were devised from Jewish law. But when more Jews became Hellenized, they were fluent in Greek and their culture, and completely, eventually completely pulled out of Jewish life and law. So consider for yourself, how do you write a story about what happens inside of the human body when certain things go on and put into motion electrical changes that impact the brain? In other words, if you have a human body, okay, and then you have the electromagnetism, and certain electromagnetic fields impact the wiring of the brain in such a way that there's changes. How do you write about that? How do you write about that? In other words, the inner life force, say, when shut down, in other words, when the electrical inner life force shuts down, it causes a gradual change in the brain and provides the light operating that brain a connection back to the heart. All right, that's getting too confusing. Let me show you what I'm saying. Right. Here you have the human brain, if you would. Okay. All right. Now here you have all of what goes on: the electricity, the electromagnetism, and everything is operating, looking at you from the left side. This is the wars, this is the cancer, this is the trouble, okay? Operating from the left side. Now, how do you write that if periodically, this stuff is shut down, the energy, the electricity is shut down, then when that happens, instead of casting it off to the left, it starts drawing from looking at you the right side. How do you write that? You see what I'm saying? And under normal circumstances, everyday circumstances, everything's coming out of the left side based on these electromagnetic principles, the energy there. When you cut it off, when you shut it down, then you cut off that left side and it starts to activate the right side. So how do you write about that? And that's the job that these ancient Hellenist mythologists had. See, the light in you, the person inside of the body, is able to enjoy the senses, enjoy the experience, but does not have to be connected to the violence, the killing, and all of the horrors that we've seen on this planet Earth. You know, you connect totally to a different. In other words, you start to make that U-turn back up that highway to the God transmitter. Well, how is that going to be? How is that going to be discussed in this mythology? Because there is a way to change the human brain so that additional circuits become active. In other words, if you go to your panel board in your house and you open the door and you see all these little switches, okay? And you say, well, the light's out in a part of the house, so we don't have any electricity. And you go down and you find out for some reason one of the switches is thrown. So you throw that switch. Yeah, we got the lights again. But the problem is what caused that switch to be thrown. Okay? In the human brain, it's exactly the same. There are switches, if you would, in the power box, which is the brain of the human being, that have been thrown, that have been shorted out because of conditions. When you have a short of some kind in the wiring in your house, it will throw the breaker switch. And you can't get that breaker switch to go back and restore the electricity until you correct that problem with the wire. It's the same thing in your head. You cannot pray about it, you cannot dance about it, sing about it, and make that switch go back. You've got to correct the problem. You've got to cut away the short in order to get that switch reset. And that's what turns the right side on. Okay? So sitting down to write about it, the story focused on Israel and Jews, a Greek Messiah, and the job of the mythologist was to find a way to dramatize the story so that when the evolution of the mind took place, people in the Aquarian age could begin to understand that shutting down or turning off the life force in meditation became the crucifixion of the sun god on the cross, which is the body. The human body. That's the top of the cross. This is the bottom of the cross. That's the arms of the cross. That's where the crucifixion takes place. Okay? It's the mythology. The crucifixion, then, in the mythology, takes place on Golgotha. Certainly it takes place on Golgotha, because the word Golgotha means skull. It's in the mind. It's in the head. The crucifixion also takes place on Mount Calvary. The word Calvary comes from the Latin calvaria, which it comes from a Greek word, which is cranium, which means cranium, head, the skull. So they not only gave it to you first on Golgotha, it's in the skull of the cross, which is your body. No, but they made it Mount Calvary, which also means cranium, which is your head. It takes place in your mind. See? So the crucifixion is of the mind. Jesus is the physical person inside of you. Not really, but it's talking about the energy inside of you represented by the word Jesus, which is the lower life form. Shutting that down means crucifying it on the cross as an inside of your body in meditation. And when that occurs, then that life force is entombed in the bowels of the lower part of the body, begins to resurrect out of that tomb to sit at the right hemisphere of the brain. In other words, the lower Jesus is killed on the cross, rises to the right side, and becomes the Christ. That's what the story is about. It is not this lunacy of God, in order to forgive you, has to torture somebody to death. The entire Jesus story plays itself out mythologically perfectly. Born of a virgin, of course. Of course. This comes out. This idea of allowing this new life force to come in inside of you, to be crucified, to rise to the right hemisphere of the brain, is born out of virgin consciousness. In other words, it is born where there is no stain of the intercourse with the left side. The intercourse with the left side is shut down. Everything is pure inside. It's holy. It's virgin. There is no thought of any kind. No impulses of any kind. It is all shut down. And out of that total separation from thought comes virgin consciousness, which then causes the birth of this new life, this new child, who eventually will be crucified inside of your body and then activate the right hemisphere of the brain. It's all talking about electricity. The virgin's name is Mary. which is Mara, which means bitter. It is the womb of bitterness, the negative, violent, carnal mind, where this birth takes place. Right in the middle of all of that, this birth takes place. There's no room at the inn. Why? What does that mean, there's no room at the inn? The inn is the part of your brain where the business worries take place. I got to do this, I got to do that, the company, the church, the religion, I got all this, I got to watch the news, oh, what are we getting into, and all that. That's the inn. That's where everything goes on. That's where all the conversations take place. That's where all the transactions take place. That's where all the stress takes place. That's where all the business takes place. There is no room at the inn. You're overloaded. There is no possible way. So the child cannot be born as long as you are in the inn, as long as you are in the left side where all of that mind, thought, activity is taking place. Child can't be born there. Busy mind cannot accommodate such a thing as that. It has to be born in the stable, the place of the animal instinct. See? In the stable, in the midst of the animal nature, which is us physically, and yet not there where all of the business is taking place. Only where the instinctive ones are, the sheep, the goats, the cow, the dogs, the cats, and so forth. Only where the instinctive ones are can the child be born. Has to be out of the place where the transactions of life take place. So we shut that off by taking no thought in meditation. We are then in virgin consciousness, outside of the inn where all of our thoughts are consumed in that worldly stuff, and there in the midst of that which is the animal nature, but outside of the place of business, the child's born in the body. The shepherd's watching the sheep. You watching your thoughts. See? Until you see that light. You watch your thoughts. In other words, your thoughts start to come in meditation, and you say, no, I'm going to focus back on something, on the music or whatever. You shut your thoughts down. Every second you can shut your thoughts down. It's another time, another instance for being ready to see the child, being ready to raise, nurture, allow the child to be crucified so it may rise up to the right hemisphere. It's the most beautiful salvation plan created by God, totally prostituted by the same people that will stand up here and say, God told me to attack. And then the wise men come from the east. Why? What does that mean? Wisdom comes from the right hemisphere of the brain. Whenever you look north, which is from the bottom of your body to the top of it, whenever you look to the top, to the north, east is always on the right side. Wisdom then comes from the east, from the right hemisphere. Wisdom not to tell you to kill anybody. Wisdom explaining to you how to live and how to retain life and how to bring life and peace and hope and all of the wonderful things that life is supposed to. Wisdom comes from the right hemisphere. The wise men come from the east. And so when the mind is stilled in meditation, the energy can begin to rise towards the brain. And as it does, in the same way that Jesus' energy rises up there, it's exactly what the sun does when it comes out of the winter solstice. It celestially right ascends, and then it reaches its highest point at the right side, or the eastern part of the sky, and June 21st, which is the summer solstice, and there is more light on that day than any other day. That's what happens inside of you when you do the same thing. That energy lying deep in the solar plexus, which is the place of the sun, is the electrical energy that travels up the nerve centers of the spine and impacts at the right side. That energy is what the mythologists call Jesus. The true Jesus. The Savior of the world, where all salvation comes. No one can be saved but by Jesus. It's true, because no one can be saved out of the mess of the tyrants of the left unless they raise that which is inside of them to come up to the right side. Call it whatever you want. You want to call it Buddha? Call it Buddha. You want to call it Krishna? Call it Krishna. You can call it chicken soup. It doesn't make any difference what you call it. You've got to allow it to work to raise itself up, because that's God's plan. And those circuits can only be activated when meditation shuts down thought and allows the energy to rise upward and then to the right side. Nothing else can do it. And so the story of the virgin birth, the crucifixion, Passover, the whole business is speaking about the normal activity that goes on in the human brain when the instructions from the ancients are followed. And these instructions of the biblical Jesus are what? Take no thought, practice the single eye, seek within yourself, and watch. That's what the biblical Jesus said, and that's what activates this energy inside of you. And mythologists were wise enough to call that wonder-working power inside of every human being Jesus. They called the higher consciousness on the right side the throne where God sits. It's all a story in symbols, but it is all absolutely true. I don't know how many people have write me and say, well, how can you say, you call it mythology and then claim you, but they don't understand. Mythology is true. Mythology is just a symbolic way of describing what's absolutely true. But if we will understand the stories, we will put in motion something that is built into every body that will turn on the circuit of happiness and love, which presently is closed because the switch in the brain breaker has been shorted out by all of the connections to the left side. You know, you touch two wires together, you touch the right wire to the left wire, you cause a short, and a switch goes off. Well, it's the same thing. The right wire touched the left instead of touching God. And it caused a short, and so the breaker's thrown. Oh, and about that circuit. You remember when the